start with because we just back from lunch, but we try to be at our best. Cool. So, I'm Darshika, but before we start, and the introduction that was shared, I would pass on to both of you for share a quick introduction along with one thing that you do outside of work. You like doing.
I love traveling.
Awesome.
And I travel for work also, but I travel beyond work also.
Yeah.
The only thing we need to say is one thing that we do beyond work.
Yes.
I'm a complete foodie, so I love to eat and travel. Yeah, I think most of us are so.
Okay, so I also love to eat and travel, and my husband's a great cook, so it complements well. But thank you for the opportunity. I think as we calibrate on workforce modernization, my first question to both of you is, we've been talking about workforce of the future, workplace of the future. What does this future look like? And you work across industries. What would it look like as we're talking about future before we get into talent strategies and what initiatives are we taking? So maybe we can start with Ramesh.
Yeah. I come from the building material cement industry. And let me first focus on this industry and then I'll widen basis my experience of the past. I think we all know that cement is a CO2 producer for the world. So I think the biggest priority that will come to this industry is how do we kind of reduce the carbon not just reduce the carbon footprint, but also be positive to the environment in every way. I think that is going to be the big challenge for the industry going, and that future is not far. It seems quite far. We've kept targets for 2050, etc. That what the world global, the climate change changes that the industries are going to implement or countries that are going to implement, but the target is going to be very, very short. It could be 2030 for most of the industries, particularly like cement. So the focus is not going to be, the work so far that has happened to these kind of industries is improving efficiency, improving technology. At the current stage, it is how do we move from a product company to a digital company. All that will shift. Now those are built upon that. The new shift will be how do we become a sustainable company. Right? And that's going to be a big shift for this industry. Similarly, depending on what phase, what kind of impact each of the industries are making, that is what would happen.
No, thank you for sharing the focus on sustenance, and what will you say, Ma'am?
So I'm going to touch upon topics that I think Ramesh has thankfully left for me to cover. It's more softer. I'm going to talk on softer aspects. So what would the talent, what would be the issues or challenges, or what would it look like in future? I think each of our organizations are going to have 4 generations of, people. So I'm not very sure of my gens, but I'm assuming it would be a Gen X, Millennial, Gen Z has entered, and our maybe the people in the late 60s. I come from an Indian organization, and we see that we still retain the older guys. So one of the talent scenarios is where an organization is trying to manage 4 generations of people who behave very differently, socio-economically very different, needs are different. So attracting them, developing them, retaining them, it's all going to be, it's going to be very different and very difficult. And do we have an answer? Not really, because we are all going to step into it and discover it ourselves. So yeah, that's from me.
Yeah, sure. And Ramesh, thank you for saying that the future is near. I firmly believe that the future is now. I mean, we've already started doing so much around building the organization which can sustain the changes, and we've already gone through enough changes to realize that as a human race we are resilient, and we're showing the right signs to be able to move the curve. So on that note, and you've started around it, Maya, as to what would the talent landscape look like now for us? What would it entail to the thinking of the organization on building and developing talent strategies? And maybe you can take on.
Like I said, there is no answer. Okay. It would all depend on what the organization strategy is going to be. So talent strategy can never be something built in a silo. Like he said, it's going to be a lot on sustenance. So your workforce, you will be looking out for younger people who have worked with energy, green initiatives. So your sourcing patterns are going to be different. So I have experienced manufacturing, I have experienced retail, I've experienced service and media. And what we see is that the challenges are going to be very different, which we have not really come across today. Their needs, like if I have policies, HR policies made for my Gen X and my millennials, this is really not going to be applicable for my Gen Z, because nor are they wanting to continue with us for a long time. They're looking for shorter term assignments. They don't have their neck in the game. While I'll have my retired folks who also I want to retain in the organization, because they have a lot of tacit knowledge, implied knowledge, whatever you call it, which is also very essential for the continuity of a business, which we don't want to lose. So keeping that knowledge, ensuring what kind of assignments we give to which group of people, and a lot of efforts is going to go in reskilling or developing my mid-management, which is my millennials and Gen X, on how to handle the younger generation and the older generation while meeting the organization goals. So there's no right answer, and I know it's very generic, but I'm trying to touch on whatever points I can. Over to you.
No, that was an excellent perspective. To add on, I think what's primarily going to change is today we have job descriptions for various roles in the organization, right? And if you looked at 10 years or 15 years or 20 years in the past, a job description that made rarely had to be changed over pretty longer periods of time. The jobs were fairly defined, but the pace of change began. Technology came in, and then the role profile started changing. I think we've come to a stage today where you can't make a static job description as you move forward, because that will be constantly changing. It will have to be raised a level high to say what is the intent, what is the impact the role has to make. Beyond that, you can't describe. That's it. And that will be a challenge in actually sourcing, identifying, building talent, right? It's not by task that you're going to do, it's by the impact that roles are going to do. It's something that you'll have to keep building talent for the future, right? Now, whether that's for technology, the technology itself is relevant in the now, today, right? A year later, all the technologies that are applicable, perhaps half of them would have become redundant. They would have got upgraded, they would have been replaced by something. So what are you going to build that for? You're going to build them for readiness constantly of what's going to change. That's a primary first challenge for talent management that's going to come in future. It's not going to be defined by roles. It's not going to be defined by tasks that people are going to do, but by the impact that they're going to do. And therefore, the build-up would begin from there. The second part is then the assessment of numbers, gaps, how you will come to that. All the models that are applicable today will have to be rethought into models for numbers that you want to do. Whether it is going to be a precise productivity-based model or it will get replaced by an impact-based model, right, of what it is going to do. And how is that? What are the variables on that? I don't have ready answers. Maybe we are attempting that for some of our industry, taking a bit more time. I'll give you an example within the cement industry. We are the largest, we are almost the second, we are the third largest cement maker in the world, and we are almost becoming the second largest. and that means a huge amount of cement gets produced and distributed across the country. We are talking of one country in India. Now the traditional way of selling was the sales guys would go to trade channels, the distributors, the dealers and the retailers, and down. That's how the retail channel would get sold. Cement usually is believed that it's a B2B, but 75% of our business comes from B2C actually, which is through the trade channel. Now with information age, we looked at all the roles what a sales guy does at the front line of servicing a dealer or a distributor. And 80% of that job we found is about information, chasing, phone calls, etc. The moment that got digitized and that became available to the distributor on his mobile or on his or her desktop, I think the role of that sales guy became then very different. What do we do? So we just shifted that to the human element that they can add, and we had to recast the roles completely. Right? So this is how I was saying the example of what was, and then what are you going to build them for future. Will that part also get taken, by another technology like AI in future? Probably. But the human element is something that we have to build and keep strong, and that's the element which we are keeping heavily at the center to cast jobs going for future. And these will always be the center of how talent should get shaped for future.
I would just like to continue. So Ramesh spoke a lot about building through his internal resources. Let me try and give you an example where we just are unable to build because we do not have the required talent pool. I work for a company called Neel Kamal. Okay, Neel Kamal, for many of us we know, is associated with plastic furniture. Now, I don't know how many of you know, but we are into a lot of ready furniture, which is MDF wood. We are into steel. We are into metal. So we do whatever, education furniture, hospital beds, a lot of such things. While our workforce, all of them only knew and understood plastic. Okay? And when you enter a new and the organization is getting ready for tomorrow, they know that plastic, nobody buys plastic furniture. Means maybe rural they do still buy. So then what? We don't have anybody who will take on the roles. We don't know much about distribution in retail formats. So you go and buy. So build versus buy also depends a lot on what your organization is aiming for the next 5 to 10 years. So I just wanted to touch on that build versus buy, where he has a lot of build options because he has a large talent pool. While here is an example where you don't have a talent pool who can take on newer businesses. So just a perspective.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing it. And just to add to it in terms of elements of developing the talent strategy, I think one nuance that I learned over a period of time is around intentional ask on what the talent aspiration is and how can the organization meet it. Our processes today entail your career journeys will be like this, you do this role, then you do this. We hire management trainees to say you'll do a 2 year of sales rotation, then come back and do marketing. The challenge is what is the individual willing to do, and that is becoming as specific as I have a 9-year-old daughter, and I'm sure all the parents in the room, on the specific ask of the brand this child is aware of today. So when your aspiration, when your ask is as nuanced, as we look for talent strategies, building in for aspiration becomes very, very critical. The other aspect is on the whole dynamics of workplace. And I was joking with somebody, are you carrying your laptops here? I want a show of hands. How many people are carrying their laptops here? How many people have their emails, office emails configured on their mobile phones? So technically this is your workplace for the time being. Right? So the context of workplace is changing, and how do you build for talent and talent strategies, aspirations and expectations in this scenario pools in very well. I would move on to ask both of you, as we look at these changing dynamics, what would it mean for leaders and leadership in the organization to adapt to or learn to suffice and survive these changes?
I'll take on from what you started first with multi-generational workforce. Like owners are multi-generation that Maya just spoke about. I think organizations as they go will be multi-generational. You'll have people towards retirement and people at entry level, and a large number of them at the same time, dealing with each other in the roles. I think the first big change adaptability is about how do we get the multi-generational workforce operating as a common team together, because otherwise usually they get dealt as cohorts in an organization, but you'll have to look at them blended as a team. And that's going to be an imminent thing. So leaders have a big role in actually accepting this, addressing it, and driving it. Second is about each leader, each functional leader, each business leader, I think has to spend much more time imagining that future of his, her part of the business, his, her part of the function that is going to take shape. And therefore say, what do I start planting today that leads me to that change? We have seen in the past kinds of changes that have come in spurts. And in India in the 90s became very famous for a term called VRS, Voluntary Retirement Scheme. And the huge automation went in. And with automation you had to let go a large workforce, then rebuild a different kind of a workforce. Right? Having learned from there as we move along, can we avoid that? Can we make it gentle to do a transition? And leaders in organization have a big role to play on that, of allowing transitions rather than knee-jerk changes that happen in response to what is happening in the environment. I think that's crucial, that's critical as we move forward. Yeah. There are many, many things I'd love to add, but over to you, Maya.
So, sorry Darshika, so I lost the train of thought. So your question is basically what should be the retention and how do we engage these?
Yes,
this
what would,
multi
how would we train our leadership to adapt to that?
That's a tough one. Our leaders are all parents, like she touched upon a point that leaders are parents, they know how to deal with their children at home. But when they come to the workplace, suddenly their behaviors change, their expectations change, and they believe that what is told gets done, which is never the case. I'll try and give an example. I'll try as much as to give examples. During COVID, we had something called as work from home. Many of your companies would have accepted this and said, okay, now this is the way of life, and you move forward with it. Both the organizations that I have experienced during this COVID, we are Indian companies, owner-driven companies run by professionals, but owners are very actively involved. So for them, seeing the employee is very important. That if the employee is there, that means the employee is working. While their grandchildren or their children believe that wherever they are, they can work. So, why not? Now, if at that level itself, people are not, the leaders are not able to come to now there's no right, there is no wrong, because even I have done work from home. I know that there are days that I can, not work and still be at work. And there are days that I'm pulling in more than 12, 13 hours at work. So there is no right and wrong over here. It all depends on your workload. If at that level there is no clarity that what is the right way to do, the next level, the management is still, we need to reskill, upskill, teach them to trust the team, and talk only about performance and productivity and work. So there is the newer generation of leaders who only talk about work and the productivity. While the older generation, it's more about a lot of emotional connect that is there at workplace. It's not just you come and you work and go. No. There is a lot of connect because we are spending so many hours at workplace. So I have no answer, but there has to be a lot of understanding, trust, and what is the culture of your organization ultimately? Is it only work related, or do you really want an engaging workplace? So that's from me.
Yeah. And I was sharing this in one other forum like this, that I believe two things that the leaders need to be very receptive to. One is the change of behavior. We just talked about how the workplace sentiment has changed, right? Today sofa is your best friend at times when you're working from home. In terms of the behavior shift that we are seeing, if you have to order and you want to eat something, you all use Swiggy. It's just so instant. So how leaders need to be on their feet and understand this concept of instant. We binge watch on Netflix today, right? Your talent strategies, your reward strategies need to be following and mirroring this behavior shift, which is there. We don't just realize it. Gone are the days when there would be a Wednesday and a serial would air and the door open and we wait until next Wednesday to see who popped in, right? So how is this shift being acknowledged, and how do we make our organizations more receptive to immediate responses? Instant reward mechanisms becomes critical. And the other thing I believe, which we talk about, we underplay it, but it's becoming even more important today, is our communication, mode of communication. Now, we say that this is so basic, everybody knows it. I'll tell you what, today you work and you respond with emojis. If you agree, you would say this, right? At school when you would do this, I'm using the term, wo bolte hain, thenga kyun dikha raha hai, right? Right? So your expression has changed, and hence the need to be precise and articulate and be understood is increasing. So as leadership, to have that trait, where you're communicating across masses, how do you engage and how do you communicate effectively becomes very, very important. Especially with this flexible work, remote working also. And just because I touched upon engagement, I really want to ask both of you, how is the engagement and retention strategies changing with the change of workforce and work dynamics?
I think the paradigms become very different in the change scenario. For example, 10 years ago, work from home was a very alien. Why 10 years ago? Just 5 years ago also. It was a very alien concept. Today, I think it's become almost kind of, you ask any young person, they'll ask for flexibility. They won't say work from home.
Yeah.
But flexibility is something that is the in thing.
Yeah.
So flexibility, learning opportunity, independence, autonomy to work, learning through failing. All these are something that future workforce will keep asking for. And as organizations, what are we doing to address those? How will we allow some of those, and how do we shift? I think the bigger challenge is how do we shift the existing managers, leaders in the organization to start accepting those and making those changes. I think is a bigger challenge, and that's where the primary work of adapting, making them conscious that this is important. One of the big work that we're doing is bridging that generational gap. Saying we're putting youngsters as mentors to the senior guys and saying that learn from them and work through. So many practices and bridging that and building it become important to understand that we belong, we run the organization together, and therefore we are part of it.
So I think he's really covered it all. How do you give them autonomy? How do you recognize them? I think recognition is something that they all, really, they want recognition. So my generation of people, we used to work because there was a need to work. Okay, there was a need. And so this is more, I'm talking about the sociology part, like a social part of it. Because we needed security. And we were born and brought up ki study, you work, and there has to be stability. And we have seen our parents work for the same company and retire from the same company. But now it is very different. And so when somebody joins the team, today they are not even going to be there for more than 2 years. And if somebody from a Gen Z is joining, maybe 6 months, 8 months, they try out projects, they see, oh, this place doesn't suit me, and then they move on. So loyalty, I don't think there is. They're not working for money, definitely. Loyalty, commitment, these are terms that they use it in their personal life, but may not be for the organization, which is also fair. So how do we then actually engage them, retain them? Should we retain them? Or do you then have roles in the organization where you have these kind of people? We were just looking up the term gig workers, which you all may all be familiar with. You have these people then for certain roles who come, go. So in my earlier organization, we have a huge talent management framework. One of the things that my senior leadership believed is they picked up very bright talent and they did very disruptive things in the organization. But they took the productivity to the next level. So be it automation, be it thinking differently, getting innovation, product innovation, but very disruptive. And then this set of talent would be pegged at very different salaries. They would get a lot of recognition, different development inputs, learning opportunities. So is your organization ready for just picking up those 5 and ensuring that these 5, yahi 5, we'll invest heavily in? So this is another way that I have at least experienced how we are engaging and retaining the younger or the talent in the organization.
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing a very pertinent question on the shift of need to work versus the want to work. And I'll just share 2 thoughts before I open it for the forum. The one thing that's changing on engagement is, you guys on Facebook, I need a show of hands again. Are you guys on Twitter? Are you guys on Instagram? So the social construct of we as human beings is changing. How do we provide that appetite of community and social construct also becomes a huge engagement lever, and that's why you see a lot of ERGs popping up in the organizations, which are employee resource groups. The reason is not because I want to have an ERG, but it is how the behavior shift is happening. The second is acknowledging, I see some of you checking emails here, I'm sure, we do it. We are still here, very much here, listening to the panel conversation. The way we operate and the way we multitask needs to be appreciated. We've learned it over a period of time. And your talent will ask for it more and more. And engagement may mean not just the best role, but 2 other stretch assignments. A project which is high profile, and trust that your guy will be able to manage it all across. So this appreciation of multitasking is equally important as you engage. And the last bit I talk about is, we're talking about globalization, we're talking about movement of talent and talent workforce, matrix organizations. Today I don't have one boss to report it to. In my organization, HR as a function doesn't report to the managing director. My manager sits somewhere in Asia Pacific. But I'm required to work with the leader, and the leader is required to work with me. To be able to create processes with one mindset of, is it easing the execution and is it easing the decision making, is the 2 levers that we need to look at, because your talent will get distracted to say, I don't know who to go to. I don't know if I'm allowed to do it. If you are able to define it, irrespective of how matrix the organization is, accountability is being clear, creates a lot of positivity and engagement in the workforce. So thank you for your patient listening, and very open to questions and all the tough questions to the panelists, please.
I hope everybody is awake and not gone off to sleep.
Good afternoon. This question is to Mr. Ramesh. I was listening. You said that when your employees, when they were in sales and they were directly interacting with the agencies for the sales of the product material, and when the automation came, then you changed the role. So, what kind of role that you changed to them to utilize them in the organization?
The point here is about automation change,
Yeah.
and let me give you example of railways, right? I think there are very few people who would have booked tickets in the 80s, right? If you had to book a railway ticket in the 80s, it was a terrible task, right? Most of you were not born then, so it was a very manual process. Railways, when they automated reservation, right? It would have made a huge workforce redundant at that time. So what did they do? They moved them into vigilance to ensure that ticketless travel drops drastically, ensure that trains arrive and leave on time. So it is reorientation of work, right? I was not part of the cement industry then. What I could say, with definitiveness, what happened. But I can give you a relative example of automation, how it can change. Earlier, there were very manual processes in cement. Today, 5 engineers manage the whole process in a control room. It's an air-conditioned control room. Everything is automated. So what happened to the people who were doing it? Capacity increased. Earlier, that plant would produce only 1 million ton capacity per year. The same plant today produces 7 million tons of cement. The number of people have kind of reduced, but adapted to many other roles that come up in the thing. The point I was making there was every leader, every manager needs to anticipate these changes that are coming in and start working on it earlier rather than after the change gets introduced, work on it. That was the point I made.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. So my question is more in terms of, the way we think or way we discuss, and whenever we're talking talent strategy, I've been attending this since morning, and all through we talk about lots of things. We talk about purpose, we talk about alignment and automation and everything. Why, as HR professionals at settings like this, do we shy away from actually talking about compensation? Because if the last 3 years have shown, we've saw in 2020, 21, technology and product managers and everything, the compensation's going through the roof, then coming down, getting humbled a little bit. But why, in settings like these, do we almost tend to shy away from talking about compensation as being the primary need as to why people work? Just a question, and I don't mean to stir up a controversy, just wanted to know what's the mindset that we need to look at.
Yeah, the question, then I can go next. No, please go ahead. No, mine will be too.
I, first of all, don't agree that HR is shying away, right? The primary point here is, I would like, let me start by putting it, I would like every individual employee in my organization to define his or her salary, right? I would like that state, right? Will it bring order or will it bring chaos? It will bring chaos right away, correct? Organization has to leave, get into a continuum of maturity to be able to do that. And a large part of HR's work is building that today. Without addressing it, you can't address this part. So therefore, the feeling of shying away is, maybe that's a feeling because of it. Because we can't address. The fundamentals have to be addressed. For example, what is the right salary? If I ask in this room, please raise your hand who feel that you're getting the right salary. Anybody? Yeah, what's the right salary? Right? That itself is a foundation to start and build upon it. Ideally, right? And that's what the future workforce is coming to. If everyone, now youngsters are saying that we want to be an entrepreneur, we want to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur earns for what they are able to deliver to the customer, and customer is willing to pay them, right? If your customer doesn't see value in what you're doing, they won't pay you. So if individuals become entrepreneurs and they're able to quote a price for what they deliver, and there's a customer willing to buy that, I think that's a stage where we'll come to. But there's a lot of groundwork to be done. And as HR professionals, that's the foundation we've got to build. And we've got to now, the time to build that is very short. We've got a lot to do there.
And probably I'll just add on here. There are two elements I'll talk about. The first is, it's not HR's shying away. One is, today HR is not HR. It's a business leader. When I talk and walk in my organization, I'm not considered an HR function, and I'm using some archaic terms as to driving engagement initiatives. I'm a business leader driving a business. And hence, when we talk about compensation, the conversation is elevated from the bucks you make to the total rewards that you earn. You are in an organization, or I'm in an organization, one element of what I make, the second of what the organization offers. Wellness, for example, I'm sure it did get spoken about, or will get spoken about in the afternoon today, is one big aspect of investment that the organizations have started to make in an individual and in their workforce that ties into the overall offering of the organization. The second aspect is our talent working for compensation? And Maya brought a very pertinent point on need of work to want of work. My parents were working to provide me education. I am working so that I can take a holiday. Right? I interviewed somebody a few weeks back. He said, listen, can you allow me to be an RJ, and I'm just working so that my parents don't bug me when I am doing my RJ work. The ask is changing, and we may continue to say that this is critical. I am not denying it's not critical. But this is not the only thing that people are looking at. And the organizations have also made a shift. Today, nobody looks at how minimum I can make. There are organizations advertising the salary ranges if you go to some of the, portals to say what roles are being offered. Because everybody knows to get the best talent in, you need to pay that amount. So that's become a baseline, and it's at no organization you would say this not being a part of the agenda at all, but this is the baseline, and the ask has shifted tremendously.
So I would like to continue on this. So I think because of the word shying away, I think my panel members got a little, they got very passionate about it. But yeah, so, in our early days of talent management, we always said you map your talent, you identify the top talent. We would all be, your 9-box grid, you see who is where, you map them, you pay them more in terms of compensation, right? I think a lot of us have gone through this and seen it. But what is also the thing that we see is these are the very top talent who also attract the fastest. So it's not the money actually. And you give them engagement, you give them projects, you give them everything that they want, but they still move. And these are the guys who are much more in demand in the market. The industry is asking for them. So sometimes whatever you do, they're not going to, it's not the money ultimately. It's what they want. And what they want, we'll never know. We don't know what we want.
You would always have somebody paying a little more. So that doesn't become a run or a focus for
So all of this was kind of coming from the fact that, over the last 3 years, right, a lot of larger companies can talk about wellness. We can, or invest in it. Not just wellness. By wellness, I mean a lot of other offerings that you give to them. But to combine when you're competing with those organizations for talent, and right now it's not a peer for peer, just that if I'm in media, I'm just comparing myself with another media company. I'm also competing with a technology company with lots of deeper pockets, right? And because of the workforce that we're dealing with, sometimes just because the offering on the other side is so massive, they have that tendency, they say that, okay, great that you're offering me wellness, you're offering me exposure, you're giving me career paths, ladder, lattice, everything. But at this point, someone's giving me double. And then there's another startup that's doubling that. We've lost someone who was at, like, let's say, an 8 lakh to a 38 lakh offer in the course of 3 months of notice period, right? So that's why I was just first of all, didn't mean to stir things up by saying the term shying away. It was just to kind of understand that how do we, drive our compensation strategy when we are not able to necessarily invest in other things as much as someone much bigger than me would be able to. That was the question. So thank you so much.
And my only suggestion to that is focus on your overall offering, because your overall offering will always be unique and you would have somebody offering more. It also depends on the need, and I'm taking a pertinent example. I was working for a retail organization. Attrition was 80% annualized. It was a PBT negative organization. It was not making profits. I couldn't go, and even when my survey said that I'm not paying enough, I couldn't pull up salaries because that was not the business, right decision to do. What we did was we offered insurance to parents. The cost was differential, but I'll tell you that became one of the talking points. Did it have direct impact on attrition? Very difficult to say. Overall attrition reduced, yes, but that was multiple levers. But that was an offering which a family where there is a single member earning could take back to their families to say, today you are insured and the company is ensuring that you get the rightful support and help. This was pre-COVID. COVID was not, we haven't heard about COVID then, but I'm saying it just became a unique offering which played into retention strategy. And compensation will always be levied through a range. India plays with 400% of compensation ranges, and could be even more, and Ramesh can share that with, we don't play in, and sometimes I find it very difficult to take it to my European and Western colleagues, that it's not like one job, one pay in India. So you would always be in competition, and it's okay.
I have the mic, so I'll get the chance to ask. I learned a lot in the past 20 odd minutes, so thanks for a lot of great insights. My question could be slightly vague or large, but in my decade-long experience in HR, I've seen multiple definitions of culture. And I always ask this, I would want each one of you to just say in one line, how do you define culture? Because I also feel that's the most abused word, right? Everyone is talking about culture, but what is everyone going for? So I would love to know from the esteemed panel on culture. Also on defining culture or policies, we always are solving today's problem, and when the topic is about the future, and I keep thinking, if I were to join a company or head HR, I actually head HR for a startup, I think about what is our employee in 2030 going to look like. And that's the question I think about daily, and I'm trying to pen a character sketch of an employee. What is a 2030 employee looking like, and how can I pivot my company's culture to 2030? And that is a legacy I would want to create. So one on culture, and if you can share your insights on how do you think about talent strategy for a future employee that will be there 4 years, 7 years from now. Sorry, it's vague.
So what according to you is culture? Since you have asked this question many times to many people.
Yeah, I've got 1,000 answers.
So what is your understanding?
Okay, so that came back on me. There's a complex or simple definition, but what I have right now used mostly
Keep it simple, very simple.
3 words, way of working. No, so I'm saying my definition of culture is 3 words, that is way of working. Right? I don't define a culture in office by beanbags or working from anywhere or something. The way you work defines your culture. Right? And it could mean multiple things, could be leadership interventions, the way you work, what place you work, what are the policies. So my simple definition is way of working for a company, and if you could stamp that or let's throw it off, I would just want to
And
hear
you ask
this.
Google to stamp it, no? Why are you
No,
asking us?
Google will always give answers which are facts, right? And
So
Leaders,
light before you all
yeah,
just
yeah.
throw us out.
I just think leaders are supposed to give answers what Google can't, and that is why I'm asking you, right? And that for me is leadership, right? If Google were to give an answers, we won't be needed, right? So that is again my view. Sorry for that, but I think that is where I seek your inputs on that.
So I'm sure the three of us will also have very different ways of defining culture. So to each, yeah, you want to say something? Answered. He only must have asked the question, no? Amalgamation of values and practices. I like that. Okay, but I'll keep it more simple. What I mean, for me, what culture is. I'm sure we all have different definitions. So these are implied policies, processes, rules. Implied. That is there in the organization, which guides an employee on how to behave at workplace. So policies, processes, implied practices, guidelines, rules, and culture is never written. Okay, it's an implied way of working. Yeah, that's according to me. I don't know whether you all have any other.
No, absolutely. I think as a layman, I would look at it, just widen what definition you said. Way of work, it's way of life in an organization. The way anyone would see a customer, a supplier, any of the stakeholders see it, they would say that this is about the organization.
And your second.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm going to add. Otherwise, my second question on you think about what would a talent look like in 2030 and how can we pivot our organizations to a future ready employee? How do you define a future ready employee?
So 2030 would mean that my Gen Z is there now in the workforce, right?
And pretty much middle management are entering from.
They would be there. So right now they must be early 20s. They would become late 20s or early 30s, right? What would they want? What are they looking like? I can tell you, they're extremely fast. They need, like Darshika mentioned, they need quick decisions. They are agile. They are heavily dependent on your, on data, on automation. They want everything ready-made to them. They are not the people who are going to get their hands dirty and fetch for data, make MIs. No, they want everything quick. It has to be at their fingertips. One thing I read, which I would like to share, is I always thought that the Gen Z would be more risk-taking as a generation because they join startups but somewhere I read that the millennials are more risk takers while the Gen Z is more risk averse because they've never seen failure. They're all people who have got a very good security net. So they've not seen failure. So they would be risk averse. Unless it's their own money, I don't know what. But this was one interesting thing. People could agree, not agree. It's something that I read. Yeah, over to you.
So, we also in our organization define culture as ways of working. The only caveat I would have here is, yes, cultures, while we talk about building culture and what can we be as organizations, it's a journey. Your organization is operating with the way it is operating unless it's in a startup mode where you can define some things. I am still calling some things because you have work pressures, you have business pressures, so your appetite. So I remember when I was, and I can say this, Prakhar was in the same organization when I was there. When we were in an insurance organization, IRDA was coming in very heavy. So while customization was easy, like if you are this individual, this age, this is your insurance, differentiation was very difficult. All the competition was offering the same product. Obviously, it meant business pressure. It meant attrition. Attrition in insurance at that point in time was 120% annualized. And to be able to say, okay, I will have a culture where I'll have flexibility to operate. I'll tell you, 60% of my insurance policies came in on the last day of the month. March 31 became like a celebratory thing where till 2 a.m. in the morning we're just clocking in what business is coming in. Now, can I define a culture there which is around flexibility, around ease of operation, around multitude of things that you can do? I mean, look at the job. It's so monotonous that there's a policy, you punch a policy, you go for a claim, you underwrite it. It depends on business construct and the value you operate with. So the value that came in was the leadership availability on those particular days to ensure that execution is easy, to ensure they are available. I, being in HR, had no role to play, but showing support and coming together, I think that defines what the organization stood for. And it was not just for that organization, it was an industry-wide problem. I work in an organization today which is a multinational organization. We talk about flexibility now. When I joined in, my manager did not sit in the same location. Nobody asked me what time I'm coming in and going out. There were no in fact, they're worried about should we start punching in now, and I'm like, you know, this is even our ages back than what we would do. But as a culture, we've been far more flexible and adaptable to Zoom much before the larger organization came towards. It is so matrix, so risk averse that if I need to change a policy, the one I got changed had 17 signatures on it. 17 to be precise. Can I change it today? No. So it is the way of working you've been and developed. You can make some shift, you can start talking about some of those, but those things remain. And as we talk about talent of the future, we're talking about how would that mean. And I'll go back to where we started off. Bringing in the right expectation on the cultural nuance is important, and that's what will be the ask of the talent in the future. When somebody joined, and I'm taking an example not from any other, but a government organization, when my dad joined, nobody had onboarding programs, orientation programs. He was put in one department, there was one phone which was a department phone, and he continued to go there till he retired. Setting expectations with talent as to what can you expect out of this ecosystem is a very important talent strategy aspect as we go on. Like when I get talent in, I said, don't ask for decisions tomorrow because they'll not happen. The mechanism of an organization to review because of the sheer DNA it has been will not change tomorrow because you have a fantastic idea. So setting that right expectation, again, going back to where I started off, to say that it's important as we look at the future talent strategy.
Hi, sorry, I know it's overstressed, and next session is actually my session, so I'm party. You know what? I think culturally, everybody talks about culture as such a fuzzy thing, like definition. I fundamentally feel, I think culture usually for great companies gets made when they become really successful, and then somebody in HR department joins, and the job of putting values falls in the lap of the HR department, and then you beautifully design some values. I think culture is what do you get hired for in this company? What do you get fired for? What do you get promoted for? And these are things and evidences you can find daily. So flexibility, if you get fired, if your boss fires you, that you need to look for a change, if you can't work from home, that's your culture, right? So I think we rather define always culture as a thing to be. I think culture is not what you recognize, culture is what you tolerate. I'll flip it around that way. I don't know if that answers your question, and sorry for butting in, but yeah, that's what I think.
Culture is not something that you tolerate. Huh? Culture is something that you live. You can't tolerate.
Yeah, potato. I'm saying culture is what you live.
No, yeah.
But
It's
what
not-
I'm fundamentally
it's not tomato,
suggesting
tomato.
is,
No.
yeah, see, culture of difference.
I'll just add one more
Respecting,
perspective.
talking.
I understand the way from where you're coming, what you tolerate. So, for example, if it's an organization where somebody is being laid off because the person was on maternity leave, and the organization tolerates that, that is culture.
Exactly.
So
I understand the vein from where he's coming from. To say what you tolerate is what you're actually setting your standards on. That okay, I will tolerate a manager removing somebody from the workforce.
So that-
I'll tolerate a no rating protection.
Sorry to just butt in, but that's also your value system.
Exactly.
It's actually your value system. If
Exactly.
your value system is aligned to their value system,
So
It's
it
smooth.
doesn't matter. So it matters is what is the rock bottom that you will tolerate in. So I understand the vein he's coming from. What is the rock bottom that is acceptable? and
Rock
it's
bottom
understandable.
is not your definition.
Yes.
Rock bottom is where you start
Exactly,
from,
where you start
right? So
from.
of course you continue to build a culture. So I'm saying today Google fired.
Yes.
The company which
That is why
always
I
was the
need to
gold
example,
standard of
yes.
culture also fired. So technically then we are saying when the pressure comes on profitability, irrespective of which company you are, you operate at a human level of profitability. So culture is context.
Absolutely.
And content is kingdom, right? So आप क्या बोल रहे हैं is a lot to do with what context you have been given. If I don't have $1,000, I can't give $1,000. It's not, culture is not a question of intent. Culture is also a social, I'm saying a person, and since ma'am you brought up sociology and I'm with you on that. A person spitting on the road in Gurgaon suddenly goes to Dubai for a holiday and stops spitting. You're socially forced to operate in a certain way. You are tolerating the restrictions put on you. So you can change a climate, you can't change a culture. And hence, what I really meant was, there are stages to culture. Maslow's mein, of course there is a definitive higher stage, which I believe is a little fuzzy, and it's always contextual and time bound. But all I'm saying is what we can ensure is that what do we ensure as we live by or tolerate, maybe a better choice of word is what we live by, we make sure it's gold standard. The moment you do that, everything else is a bonus.
On that note,
Yeah.
thank you. It was a very engaging conversation. I'm very pleased that we could engage within the audience also, because that's the objective. So thank you so much for your time, and we can invite the next panel because we've taken some of your time.
Apologies for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.